The night pressed in heavy around me, the silence broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards. As a child, I used to wake to the sound of something crawling beneath my bed, claws dragging across the wood like nails on a coffin lid. My mother always told me it was just dreams, but I knew what I saw, eyes glowing like embers, staring from the dark. Now, years later, I told myself those memories were nothing but nightmares, yet tonight I felt it again. The stillness was suffocating until a whisper slid into my ears. "Lucy, I never left." My heart froze. I gripped the blanket tighter, whispering to myself, "It's not real, it can't be real." But then it came again, closer, hungrier, and I knew the monster had returned. I tried to steady my breath, but my pulse pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I reached toward the lamp, praying for light, but froze when I felt cold air brush my cheek like a sigh. "You're not real," I whispered, but my voice cracked. The bedroom door creaked open an inch, and for a moment I prayed someone would step in. Maybe my mother, maybe anyone. But deep down I knew I was alone. The walls groaned as though the house itself was alive, pressing in around me. I remembered the nights I screamed as a child, and was told to stop imagining. But dreams don't whisper your name. Dreams don't press claws against the wood. I forced myself upright, my legs heavy beneath the blanket. If I checked the floor, maybe I'd silence the storm in my chest. "If I don't look, it wins," I muttered, though I barely believed it. I lowered one bare foot, skin prickling at the icy air. The silence pressed tighter, as if the house itself waited for me. Memories clawed at me, of the night something nearly dragged me beneath, when I screamed until my throat bled. My mother told me it was a nightmare, but the bruises on my ankles said otherwise. Still, if I didn't look now, I'd never breathe again. The wood felt solid at first, and relief almost made me laugh. But then, it pulsed under my toes, vibrating faintly, as though something alive pressed beneath it. I gasped and yanked my leg back, clutching it to my chest like a child. "It's happening again," I whispered. The floor moaned, claws scraping underneath, and my breath caught sharp in my throat. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to cry out. No one ever believed me before, and I knew no one would now. I was trapped in the silence with it, just me and the monster that had waited all these years. I threw the blanket aside, trembling as my breath tore from me in jagged bursts. "I won't run this time," I whispered, even as fear cracked my voice. I leaned forward, lowering my face toward the dark gap beneath the bed. The silence stretched unbearably before a slow exhale drifted up, deep and animal, savoring my fear. My heart pounded so violently, I thought it would stop. Inch by inch, I pushed closer, until my eyes met the void. And there they were, two ember-red eyes gleaming back at me, the same ones from my childhood. They blinked once, deliberate, as if recognizing me. My scream died in my throat, leaving only silence. I sat in the dark, clutching my knees as the silence pressed against me like a suffocating blanket. The eyes under the bed had vanished, but the memory burned in my mind, searing my thoughts with terror. I wanted to scream, but no sound left my lips. My body trembled, yet I forced myself to whisper, "It's not real. I'm stronger now." I needed to believe the words, but deep down I felt like that terrified child again. The house groaned, every creak a reminder I wasn't safe. I longed for comfort, someone to prove I wasn't alone, yet I knew no one would come. The monster had chosen me, and I feared this was only the beginning. Morning light leaked weakly through my window, but it brought no comfort. I sat at the kitchen table with untouched coffee, staring into the black surface as if it could answer me. The memory of those glowing eyes left me restless, unable to eat, unable to think. I whispered to myself, "I'm losing my mind." But the scratches on the floor proved otherwise. I ran my hand along them earlier, grooves etched into the wood like signatures of something that shouldn't exist. I thought of calling someone, but who would believe me now? The world outside carried on as if nothing had changed, but my world was already broken. Later that day, I met James, my childhood friend, who always claimed monsters lived only in our minds. He smiled warmly, but his eyes studied me with suspicion. "You look pale, Lucy," he said, and I forced a weak laugh. I wanted to tell him everything, yet the words stuck in my throat. If he didn't believe me as a child, why would he now? "I just didn't sleep," I whispered, sipping water to hide the tremor in my hands. He kept talking about normal things, his voice calm, logical, grounding me. But I felt a gulf between us, as if he lived in a safe world I could never return to. When I returned home, the shadows seemed thicker than usual, clinging to the corners like webs. I closed the curtains, hoping darkness would feel safer if I chose it. But the scratches on the floor drew my eyes again. They were deeper now, sharper, as if carved by something hungry. I knelt beside them, tracing their edges with trembling fingers, whispering, "Why me?" The air grew colder, my breath turning shallow as I felt unseen eyes watching. For a moment, I swore I heard laughter, faint and mocking, curling around me like smoke. I backed away, every nerve screaming. But I knew running would change nothing. That night I tried to sleep, but the silence was worse than the noise. Every tick of the clock echoed like a countdown, each second heavier than the last. I lay still, eyes fixed on the ceiling, repeating over and over, "It can't touch me, it can't touch me." But the floor groaned again, slow and deliberate, as though something crawled closer. My breath hitched, body stiff, but I refused to look. Then came the whisper, soft and cruel. "Lucy, I am waiting." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I clutched the blanket tighter, realizing the nightmare had never ended. It had only been waiting for me to grow up. The next evening, I walked through the house with every light on, yet the shadows clung like parasites. I told myself I'm safe in the light, but my voice sounded hollow. The silence mocked me, broken only by the hum of electricity. I checked under the bed, under the table, inside the closet, yet my chest stayed heavy, as though the monster moved just out of sight. My hands shook as I whispered, "You can't control me anymore." But a soft creak echoed behind me, sharp as a warning. I spun, heart racing, only to see nothing but the darkened hallway waiting. I visited James again, desperate for someone to ground me. I told him about the scratches, the whispers, the eyes. His brow furrowed, and he shook his head gently. "Lucy, you're exhausted," he said, his tone careful but firm. He believed in reason, not nightmares. I gripped his hand, begging him to believe me, but he pulled back with a nervous smile. The distance between us grew like a canyon. "It's stress, nothing more," he insisted, but his words felt like betrayal. I wanted to scream, "It's real," but the fear of his doubt silenced me. That night, I avoided my bedroom, curling on the living room couch. The air felt colder than usual, every shadow stretching too long. I left the TV on, hoping noise would drown the silence, but static flickered suddenly across the screen. My breath caught as the white noise seemed to whisper, faint words curling like smoke. "Lucy, down here." I grabbed the remote, my hands shaking, but the screen stayed alive with static. I shouted, "Leave me alone." My own voice sounded foreign, desperate, trembling. Then, the static cut out, leaving only silence deeper than before. I woke on the couch hours later, drenched in sweat. The TV was dark, the room swallowed in silence. Then I felt it, a weight pressing the air, heavy, suffocating. I sat up slowly, every nerve screaming. In the corner, shadows seemed to thicken, forming the outline of something crouched, watching me. My throat tightened as I whispered, "I see you." The gear flickered, half there, half gone, like smoke trapped in human form. The eyes glowed faintly, familiar and hateful. I clutched the blanket, knowing if I blinked, it would move. I fled upstairs, heart pounding, locking myself in the bathroom. I stared into the mirror, hoping to find myself whole. But the reflection felt wrong. My eyes too dark, my face too pale, as if something watched from inside. I whispered, "This isn't me," but the reflection didn't move in sync. My heart stopped as its lips curled into a slow smile, while mine stayed still. I stumbled back, knocking over bottles, glass shattering across the tile. Fear swallowed me whole as I realized the monster wasn't just under my bed. It was inside me, waiting to take control. I couldn't stay in that house, not another night. I drove to my mother's old place, the one I hadn't entered in years, hoping to find answers I had buried. Dust coated every surface, the air heavy with silence and memories. I ran my fingers across the wall where my childhood drawings still clung, faded but intact. Monsters under the bed, sharp teeth, red eyes. I had drawn them over and over, desperate for someone to see. My mother's voice echoed in memory. "You'll grow out of it." But I never did. As I stared at those drawings, I felt the weight of truth pressing harder. I hadn't imagined it as a child. It was real. It had always been real. I searched the attic, a place I had feared since childhood. Boxes piled high, filled with forgotten pieces of our lives. My hands shook as I opened one marked with my name. Inside, I found old journals, pages filled with my scribbled handwriting. Entry after entry described nights of terror, whispers from under the bed, and scratches on my legs. I had begged for help in those pages, and no one had listened. My throat tightened as I whispered, "Why didn't she protect me?" A cold breeze passed through the attic, though no windows were open, carrying the faint sound of laughter that didn't belong. I called James, my voice shaking, and begged him to meet me at the house. When he arrived, he looked at the journals with skepticism, flipping through the pages. "These are just childhood fears, Lucy," he said, his tone flat. But I pointed to one entry describing the eyes, the exact red glow I had seen last night. His face tightened, just for a second, before he hid it. "It's still stress," he insisted, but I saw doubt flicker in his gaze. "You saw them too," I whispered. He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. That night I stayed in the old house, unable to leave. I lay on my childhood bed, the same wooden frame that had once hidden the monster beneath. Every creak and groan sounded amplified, each shadow on the wall twisting into something alive. I whispered, "Show yourself," my voice trembling but determined. For a moment, the silence mocked me. Then the floor beneath the bed rattled, vibrating like a heartbeat. The air grew cold, my breath clouding. I closed my eyes, clutching the journal to my chest, praying for strength I wasn't sure I had. I woke to whispers, soft and steady, echoing in the dark. They weren't just coming from under the bed. They came from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the voices slid through, curling inside my head. One voice rose clearer than the rest, low and cruel. "She knew, Lucy, she knew and left you." My chest seized as the truth clawed its way into me. My mother hadn't ignored the monster. She had lived with it, maybe bargained with it. My childhood screams weren't dismissed. They were endured, because she feared it too. I sat on the floor of my old room, surrounded by journals, when I found a letter folded beneath them. The paper was yellowed, the ink faint, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. My hands shook as I read the words. She wrote about it, about the nights she heard the same whispers, the same scratching claws. She wrote that it never wanted her, it wanted me. My chest tightened as I whispered, "She knew. She knew it was after me." My breath grew shallow, anger and terror clawing together in my throat. The monster hadn't just haunted me, it had chosen me, and my mother let it. I confronted James, shoving the letter into his hands. "She knew," I cried, my voice breaking. "Hut." He read the words, his face tightening as though he'd expected this. My stomach dropped. "You knew too," I whispered. He didn't deny it, only sighed, looking away. "It's always been tied to your family," he admitted, his voice low. My head spun, betrayal burning like fire. "You let me think I was insane," I hissed, trembling. He reached for me, but I pulled back, fury and fear flooding every vein. The monster wasn't just mine anymore. It was our secret, and he had carried it all along. I demanded answers, and James finally confessed. He had seen the monster as a boy when we played together in this house. He told me he saw it watching me, never him. He admitted he had stayed silent because he was terrified, because he thought if he ignored it, it would leave him alone. My chest burned with fury as tears spilled down my cheeks. "You left me with it," I whispered, broken. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. The truth cut deeper than the monster's claws. Betrayal wasn't only my mother's, it was his too. I staggered back into my old bedroom, clutching the journal. My reflection stared at me from the cracked mirror, but this time its lips moved before mine. "You were chosen," it whispered, voice crawling out of my own throat. I screamed, throwing the journal at the mirror, shattering glass across the floor. Blood welled on my hand as shards cut deep, but I barely felt it. I sank to the floor, whispering, "Why me?" The broken reflection stared back, smiling with jagged teeth that weren't mine. The truth was undeniable. The monster wasn't just after me. It was part of me. The house vibrated with whispers, rising into a chorus of cruel voices. My ears rang as the truth sank in. My bloodline was cursed. My mother knew, James knew, and the monster had waited for me all along. It wasn't hiding anymore. The claws scraped across the floor, circling me, the sound loud as thunder. My chest heaved as I whispered, "I won't let you win." But a voice rose from beneath the floor, deep and echoing, "You are already mine." The walls seemed to pulse. The floor trembled, and I realized escape was no longer possible. The monster was no longer just under my bed. It was inside my veins. The walls of the old house groaned as if alive, shadows pulsing with each beat of my racing heart. I stood in the center of my childhood room, journal clutched in my bleeding hand. "You've haunted me long enough," I whispered, though my voice trembled. The floorboards buckled beneath me, claws carving deep grooves around my feet, circling like a predator closing in. A cold wind swept through, though every window was shut, carrying the stench of rot. My stomach twisted as laughter rose from under the bed, deep and guttural. "Show yourself," I screamed, though terror burned through every word. The floor split open with a shriek of wood, and from the dark gap rose a figure shaped from smoke and bone. Its eyes blazed ember-red, locking onto mine, and every memory of childhood terror surged back in one crushing wave. My knees nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stand. "You won't take me," I whispered, though my teeth chattered. It leaned forward, claws dragging across the floor, sparks flying from wood. Its voice slithered inside my skull. "You are mine, Lucy. Always mine." I screamed in fury, "Not anymore," and stepped toward it, trembling but unbroken. I grabbed the shards of broken mirror from the floor, blood mixing with glass, and raised them like a weapon. My reflection still smirked in the fragments, its lips moving without mine. "You can't fight me," it hissed. My chest heaved, but rage burned brighter than fear. "Watch me," I spat, and slashed the air toward the shadow. The creature recoiled, its form flickering like smoke in a storm. For the first time, it retreated, howling in anger. My hand throbbed, glass cutting deeper, but pain meant I was still alive. For the first time, I felt like I had struck back. The house shook as though it hated me, walls cracking, plaster raining down. The monster howled, its form stretching across every shadow in the room. My ears rang, but I shouted over the noise, "You can't control me anymore." My blood dripped onto the floor, searing like fire against the wood. The monster screeched, its claws raking across walls, sparks igniting brief flashes of flame. The voices in my head screamed louder, dozens overlapping, trying to drown me out. But I forced my breath steady, clenching the shard tighter, knowing this was my only chance to break free. With one final scream, I drove the glass into the floor where the shadows pulsed strongest. The wood split, the house shaking like thunder as the monster howled in agony. Red light flared beneath me, searing through the cracks, and for a moment I thought it might consume me too. My body trembled as the creature's form unraveled. Smoke scattering, its eyes fading into black. I collapsed to my knees, chest heaving, blood dripping freely from my hand. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. For the first time, the house felt empty. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't victory. It was only survival, and survival came with a price. I staggered outside into the pale dawn, bloodied and shaking, the house groaning behind me like a dying beast. My chest rose in ragged gasps as I whispered, "It's over." But the words felt empty, fragile. The silence pressed heavy, deeper than before, and I realized survival didn't feel like victory. I looked at my hand, still dripping blood, the shard of glass long gone. The marks carved into the floor burned in my mind, etched forever. My mother's voice echoed faintly in memory, a warning disguised as comfort. I had faced the monster, but I hadn't destroyed it. I had only set it free. I went back to James, hoping for comfort, but when he saw me, his eyes widened, not with relief, but with fear. He stepped back, shaking his head. "It's not gone, is it?" he whispered. I wanted to deny it, to say I had beaten it, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I felt something cold coil inside me, like smoke filling my veins. He must have seen it in my eyes because his voice cracked as he said, "It's in you now." My stomach turned as I realized he was right. The monster hadn't been defeated. It had moved. I locked myself in my apartment that night, staring into the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked back, pale and trembling, but beneath the surface I saw something else. A shadow smiling faintly, its red eyes flickering behind mine. "You can't hide from me," it whispered in my head. My knees buckled, and I gripped the sink, whispering back, "I'll fight you." But even as I said it, my lips curled into a smile that wasn't mine. Tears streamed down my face, as my reflection moved first, lifting its hand before I did, waving mockingly. I screamed, but my reflection only laughed. Days blurred as I tried to live normally, but the whispers never stopped. In crowds, I heard my name. At night, claws scraped inside the walls. I avoided James, knowing his fear was justified. I felt it in my bones. The monster was no longer separate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of crimson light, visions of children's beds, of little faces frozen in terror. It wanted more than me now. It wanted the world. My hands trembled as I wrote in my journal, the same words over and over. "I am not alone. It lives in me." Tonight, I lie awake, listening to the whispers growing louder, closer, filling every corner of my room. My body shakes, but I no longer scream. I realize now this was never about defeating it. It was always about becoming it. The blanket clings to my skin as I whisper one last time, "Please, not me." But a laugh rises from my throat that doesn't belong to me, deep and cruel. My eyes burn as the ember-red glow spreads, lighting up the room. I understand the final truth. The monster never lived under my bed. The monster has always been me.